in the Saturday Flippy one. What is that one called, Mason? Where he plays the stepdad that's getting married.
Freaky Friday.
Freaky Friday, but the new one. That's my other favorite role of Mark Harmon. So Jethro is Mason's, and then everybody who's been there around. So my answer to that question would be Phoebe. Okay. Phoebe Buffet. All right. So there's our new names. Now we're going to hell forever and ever and ever because we have given that new name. We shall die now. Okay.
Unpacking Mormonism and other religious trauma is meant for educational purposes only.
And welcome back to Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. We are here today for our brunch. I've got my coffee right here, and we are recording live to talk about Mason's and my experience in the temple. So, Mason, what do you... I don't see you. We're trying something different. I don't see you. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Hey. Okay,
I flashed in for a second.
I'm sorry?
I said I flashed in for a second, apparently, right?
Oh, okay, great. All right, so Mason, do you want to share a little bit about what's been going on behind the scenes?
I see us on the screen. What? Huh? Who?
We're live, hun, and you are lost in La La Land.
Yeah, I was just looking for us on Facebook so I could, follow along.
But, okay. So, welcome, everybody. Mason, would you like to share a little bit about what's been going on recently?
For us?
Yeah.
All kinds of craziness. What else is new? Well, the really cool thing that has happened recently is that the appraisal came back on the farm that we're trying to buy, and everything is good.
Yeah.
So we're just waiting on loan information, but within the next short little while, we'll own a farm.
I think, if I remember correctly, from our lender, they were saying, I think like as early as the end of this week we could, because everything's ready. We're just like getting insurance and stuff. So yeah, we are really excited about the Daisy Girl Wellness Farm that is coming your way, and all that will entail. And yes, Mason, I can see you now. Your comments are showing up. So the announcement then what, Mason?
I said, well, that's good.
Yeah, so the announcement is, I think we fixed the comment issue. So if you are joining us today, then you are able to comment, I think, on any of the platforms that you're watching this on, and we should be able to see it. If we do not see it, please, the one that we know we can see, excuse me, is the Unpacking with Sarah YouTube page. So if you head over to the Unpacking with Sarah YouTube page, and Alex, if you might be able to get the link for that and maybe run it at the bottom of the screen or something, so that way people who are looking for that can find it, that would be amazing. I'm recording on my cell phone today instead of my computer, so I'm still learning where to look. So if I'm not looking at you, please know that I am working on trying this differently, because where our farm is, we're out in the boonies. Hi, Alex from YouTube commenting. Yes, we can see that. So the farm is out in the boonies, which means we will not have a wired internet connection. So we're just troubleshooting before we move over to make sure that what we are bringing our viewers is still quality content, quality the digital stuff, that it's all working. So, all right.
Yes.
So today, Mason and I are going to be sharing a little bit more about the endowment session. So when we recorded last with America, Marvel, and Julia Sanders, we really went deep. We did a deep dive into the historicity of the temple. We went into a deep dive into how things have changed and whatnot. And today we really wanted to talk more about the personal experiences and thoughts that Mason and I had. So, Mason, I have got one more one more picture I'm uploading for Alex. He doesn't know it's coming because I was like, ooh, I want to do this. But Mason, I wanted really, if you were comfortable, if you would like to kind of start us out, because you said that your experiences in the temple were really positive. So, kind of what we're looking for is like, what were your thoughts? What emotions did you have? Did you learn anything new? Did anything bother you? And we've already talked, I think, quite in depth in previous episodes about how the initiatory bothered us. I really want to focus today on the endowment session, because our next episode is going to be on the ceilings. And I think, Mason, you and I have a lot to talk about there with the ceiling. So I really wanted to focus our experiences and the show today on the endowment. So take us away, Mason. And I'm not going to be looking at you for a while because I'm going to get this picture for Alex. So,
Well, I don't know if I can talk with you not looking at me. That seems impossible. Thank you. That's much better. I appreciate that.
you're very welcome, babe. I love
So yeah,
you so
I did.
much.
I did say last time that I didn't really have any issues with the endowment ceremony. I will. There's a couple of caveats I want to put in here first as I talk about this. First, I don't have a very good memory for events. And there's a couple different reasons for that. Some trauma that I'm just working through on my own, and just kind of my penchant to be always looking towards the future, but never really planning for the future, and not really remembering the things in the past. So that's gonna that adjusts what I can talk about a little bit. And then secondly, I think I mentioned this in the last episode. I don't remember if it was something we were just talking about or from the last episode, but when I went through the temple, it was because I was getting ready to go on my mission. And there was nothing getting in the way of me going on a mission. And so there wasn't a whole lot of focus on, well, that was weird. That was strange. That was, I don't know what to think about that, because it just was. It was one of the things that it was just another check mark on the list. And I imagine a lot of Exmos can kind of relate to that. It was just another check mark. And so I didn't really give myself the time to think about the endowment. It just was. That was after all the penalties had been taken out. So there was all that weirdness wasn't there. And it was just odd. So for my endowment session, I had my dad with me. As things just came up, he was able to just kind of talk me through what was going on. And I was really appreciative of my dad for that. My dad and I have had a pretty decent relationship over the years. In spite of some of the things that have been a struggle, we've had a pretty decent relationship, and a much better one now. So as I go through the endowment, it felt like a very spiritual experience to me. I don't know if it felt like a spiritual experience simply because that's what I expected it to be, or because there was something very special to me. I don't know that I could really delineate which one of those things that was. But it was special. As I look back now, and with all the new things that I've seen in my life and some of the struggles that I have with the church in general, and as I've stepped away from the church and have a new perspective on things, and I look at things as applicable to cults and so on and so forth, there's a lot of different feelings about it now. But when it comes to the endowment session itself, I didn't really have any issues or struggles with it. It was just kind of a special experience that was just another check mark on the list of things that needed to be done.
So I guess my question is, did it feel special to you because you kind of had this ritual, this rite of passage? Really, you're the oldest, so rite of passage, and that you got to do that with your dad, almost like that. You say check mark, but because I know you, it's almost like this, because you were doing everything, quote unquote, the right way. Like, you knew that your dad was proud of you, happy with you, your parents were proud of you. So almost this like bonding moment with your family in a way because your family wasn't super great at expressing just their general emotions and feelings in life? Or am I like reading way too much into that?
I don't know that there was very much of that. I knew what I wanted. And while, of course, every kid wants their parents to be proud of them, I wanted that just as much as anybody else. I don't recall that being a part of it. It's just what I wanted to do. When I got baptized or got the priesthood or just all the other check marks along the way, my parents were on my side. Cool. I don't remember that being a big part of why I made those decisions. I was all in. The church was real. The church was true. And so I was going to do everything that was necessary to continue in that path.
Yeah.
So,
Do you feel like you had earned the right to be there?
oh yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Definitely. I had worked hard to stay within the lines, and definitely. I felt like I'd earned my right to be there.
So what do you mean? Like, what did you have to do to earn that right? You say, I stayed in the lines. Like, what did that mean for you?
Mostly it meant avoiding all the things that would have kept me out of the temple. So there's lots of things that we do, but they're far less specific. Like, for instance, when I was a kid, it would have been things like home teaching, right? Was I a great home teacher? No, I don't think I've ever been a great home teacher in my life. There were some periods
You're
where
a
I
great
did.
bishop.
There were periods where I did a really good job, but for the most part, I've never been a great home teacher. But when it comes to the things we're supposed to do, they're far less specific. When it comes to the things that we know we're not supposed to do, they're pretty specific. And
Mm.
so it's much easier to focus on. And I think that's part of the reason why the church, and like you go to general conference and stuff, why they focus so much on the things you're not supposed to do is because it's easy. It's easy to draw the lines. Don't have sex. Don't look at pornography. Don't masturbate. Don't lie. Those kind of things are pretty specific. And so I think that's why the focus is there.
Well, I think just as humans in general, it's pretty normal for us to focus on the what not to do's or the negative
Sure.
experiences. Like our brains are wired for don't touch the hot stove, it's dangerous. And so when we
Right.
start giving, I think one of the things that really stands out to me in the Mormon interviews for temple worthiness and those types of things, when we focus on the, don't drink coffee, oops, be
Sinner.
positive, productive, patient, and persistent in drinking your coffee. Hang on. Oh, coffee. But when we focus on if you drink coffee, you're going to lose the spirit, then my amygdala, that protective part of my brain, is like, oh, don't drink coffee then. And so when we're focusing on the do nots, really what we're doing is we're training our brain to be afraid of the withdrawal of the spirit or withdrawal of existential approval by being afraid of all these thou shalt nots. And I think that one area, Mason, where you and I have talked quite extensively is that you were kind of unique as a young man in the sense of when you went to the temple, you had not masturbated. You had not had ever any issues with what is called the law of chastity. I mean, but when you went through the temple, you didn't even know what a menstrual cycle was. You knew that girls had them, like you knew that girls had periods, but you had no idea that that meant bleeding from the hootie hottie. And
I'm not
I
sure.
know that, right?
I,
I know that because I'm the one who taught him that.
I'm not sure I even knew that girls had periods, just to be completely full disclosure there. Like, I was very ignorant of that kind of stuff. I just was. I don't know what the reason was that I was. I just was. One of the things that you brought up there.
What's the difference in age between you and your because you're the oldest, so the oldest sister that you have, what's that age difference? Is it 3 years or 4?
It's about 3 years.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
How much of an age difference is there between you and brother? Because it's you, brother.
17 months.
So 17 months, and then between that brother and sisters, another 17 months?
Somewhere around there. Yeah, I'm not
Oh,
exactly sure, but
your
close.
mom had a lot of babies all bam, 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 bam. That
Yeah, well,
like
we don't mess
my whole
around.
soul is stressing out and you guys are all grown up.
We don't mess around. So one of the things that you said that I found very interesting, and part of what we've talked about here, is if you look at the historical view of Christianity, we hold to the Old Testament, right? And in the Old Testament, you have 2,500 years until you have Abraham, where there's no real clear delineation of any kind of law that they were living. Like there's almost nothing.
Right? It was free for all.
Right.
Although
And
Cain got punished for killing, so was there like don't
right.
kill anything?
Well, I don't mean that there wasn't a law. I'm sure
Okay.
that they had commandments or whatever. If they existed, I'm sure they had them. But there's no written down any kind of law. The only real punishment that you see in the Old Testament up to Abraham is the punishment of Cain. That's it for murder. And then from Abraham, you see kind of the covenant come into play about being righteous, but there's no real clear delineation again of what righteous means.
Right.
And then you end up with the slavery in Egypt, and it's not till Moses, which is like, if I remember correctly, about 1600 BC. So if you hold with the 4,000 years before Christ, which the Bible kind of delineates, you're talking about a full 2,400 years where you don't have any idea of any kind of law, period. And then the first law that you see is the law of Moses, and the law of Moses is incredibly restrictive. It tells
Right.
you very specifically all the things that you're not supposed to do, including the penalties for them if you do them. And then you go through that whole period of time with the children of Israel, and then you get to Jesus, and the law that he lays out is so, I don't really like the word ambiguous, but I'm going to use it ambiguous because there's not a clear set of lines.
Right.
There's
Hi,
sort
DJ
of
Norman. We are excited to have you here. Keep going, Mason. Wanted to
there's
say hi to
sort
DJ.
of yeah, no problem. There's sort of um rules. Like he kind of sets up some rules, but they're very ambiguous about how you might control people with those rules. Like I don't think there's any I don't think there's any way in the Sermon on the Mount to control people by what Jesus set out. And so then you see later
Whoa, whoa,
on
whoa.
with Paul.
Whoa, go back. Say a little bit more about that. There's
So
no on the Sermon on the Mount. Say a little bit more about that.
well, so if you look at Matthew chapter 5, let me just go there
Oh,
real
he's
quick.
pulled out his scriptures. Y'all, I don't even know
Yeah.
where my scriptures are. And he went and pulled out his personal scriptures right there. Mason came prepared today for this show.
Right. So these are the Beatitudes, and I'll just read a few of them. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Well, you take that right there. What do we all want? We all want to go back to God. Everybody that I feel like, and maybe this is a little too expansive, but everyone that's living a religion in general, the goal is to get back to God. Whatever your opinion of God is, the goal is to get back to God. Well, the very first one that he says, Jesus, the very first one, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So the very first thing he says is, if basically the way I interpret that is, if you want to go to the kingdom of heaven, you need to be poor in spirit.
Right.
Well,
So what I hear you saying is that like the law of Moses restrictive is the law of thou shalt not.
yeah.
Whereas Christ's law or the Beatitudes are let's strive for being this. And rather than the Beatitudes being a do or die, like if you do these things, you're going to go to heaven. But if you don't, you won't. It's more like strive for this to improve your functioning. Whereas law of Moses and 10 commandments are thou shalt not. And if you do, you shall die. Whatever. I'm
Right.
being dramatic here. Is that what
Right.
you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Well,
And
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was
Well, no,
just
I'm
going
trying
to
really hard not to interrupt, and I've done a really good job of that until right now.
well, and I'll just read a couple of more. Blessed
Yeah,
are
go
the
ahead.
poor in spirit. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. These kind of things. He's like basically giving, these are some of the values or characteristics that I want you to have. And if you
Right.
have them, these are the things that will be your reward. But they're all very vague. Like the very first one, blessed are the poor in spirit. How many people have argued about what that means?
You can buy Trauma Bonded, a true story of navigating attachments forged in complex PTSD by me, anywhere books are sold, including Audible.
The world's most exciting podcast, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, New York Times best-selling author and National Radio Hall of Fame inductee, Michael Savage.
I'm Michael Savage, host of the Savage Nation podcast, home of borders, language, and culture. Be here or be nowhere. The Savage Nation podcast.
Catch the Michael Savage podcast on all podcast platforms every Tuesday and every Friday.
What does it mean to
who
be
knows
poor
what that
in
actually
spirit?
means? Right.
But the only reason we're arguing about it is because religion has moved in to control the way that you live your life. And you
Right,
don't
and the
really
way you
see that.
the way you control somebody is by giving them something to be afraid of.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Or holding their existential existence at bay,
Survival.
or as a
Right,
ransom.
you say
It's the carrot that you
existence.
dangle.
Right, you say your existential existence. I say your existential survival, because your
Sure.
options are live in heaven with God forever versus go to hell and eventually burn in hell and die and be no more. So we're still talking
Right.
about instilling fear. And I think the thing that's really interesting to me is that if you look at humanity in general, this is usually how we train our children as well. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, when I've got a toddler, I'm going to be teaching them things usually first by telling them what not to do. So, don't put that in your mouth. Don't touch that hot stove. Don't stick
Sure.
your finger in the electrical outlet. No biting mommy. But we're not really focusing with our toddlers on things like, I want you to share. And the reason is because as a toddler, their amygdala is so big that we are teaching them by working with the amygdala to learn what's safe and not safe. And then as they get older, those concepts like sharing begin to actually make sense because you have that frontal cortex development. And so when you're kind of comparing the Bible in that way, like the Old Testament sounds like these are your, at least first however many years. These are your toddler years. And then by the time you get to the New Testament, you're like, hey, your brain has grown in. Let's actually utilize it. But my question, Mason, is what does any of this tangent, like it sounds like we tangented pretty good there. What does any of this have to do with your temple experience? Like what, can you tie that back into what you were trying to say?
I don't, maybe, but I don't, you asked a different question at the beginning and I don't remember what that question was now.
Don't blame that on me. That's gotta be your fault. I don't make mistakes.
Right. You're not leading this discussion at all. I think what the other piece that I was going to get to is that it's not till you start reading the epistles of Paul and the apostles where you start to see a little bit more of the religiosity coming in. And then certainly, around 300 AD when Constantine comes in and they actually form this church, then you really see the pressure. It's almost like you've stepped back into the law of Moses. And part of the struggle there is that you see that a religion can't control you without strict standards. I think this came from,
Strict rules.
folks. Yeah. Yes, not strict standards, strict rules. And so I think that that's part of the issue. And I don't have any idea how we got to where we are. But
yeah, because we were talking about how your worthiness was like, unlike most males at the age of, so now it's 18 for you, it was 19, going through the temple for the first time in preparation to go on a mission, that you hadn't had any issues at all with law of chastity, and that you were so naive you didn't even know what menstruation was. And then somehow we ended up on this like Old Testament, New Testament thing, which I mean, great points, but people want to know about this temple shit because, like we said, we were going to talk about it. So Mason went on a tangent. It wasn't Sarah's fault this
And
time.
I don't even remember
That's
why.
amazing. Mason had a squirrel. Mason had a squirrel.
I'm going to go
Squirrel.
back. I'm going to go back and watch this later. And I'm
There
going
it
to
is.
find
There's
the
the squirrel.
question that you asked me that led to this tangent so that I can just toss it back on you.
I tell you what, the first person who emails us at DaisyGirlCommunications at gmail.com and tells us how the hell Mason and I got onto this tangent will get a Daisy Girl Communications stainless steel water bottle for free. Okay. So the first person who lets us know, and if you do it in the comments today and tell us how the hell we got all distracted and squirreled out on you, I will message you. You can private message me your address and we will send you free Daisy Girl merch. These bottles are really great and they're the perfect size to fit in your cup holder in your car. And these are some of the free gifts that we give as you participate in our show, which we didn't announce that that's what we were doing. So, ta-da! This is also the announcement. If you are joining us live and commenting and engaging in the show, you get free merchandise. And we've got some really awesome things to give out because we're getting ready to move. And so what that means is the boxes and boxes and boxes of merchandise that I have over there, I don't want to move it to the new place. So please earn it for free. Free shit. Hello, MJ. It is so great to see you on this second Saturday. And there is quite a bit of our merchandise right there. Thank you, Alex, for pulling that up. You are doing amazing. I love you, Alex. Like seriously, I love Alex. Okay. So Mason, let's go back to actually talking about the temple and
It
your
seems like a
worthiness.
downer, but let's do it.
Right, because what I remember us talking about before we went "Bloop," is that you felt like you had earned the right to go.
Yes.
And I used those words obviously on purpose because so most Christian religions that I'm familiar with that I would say don't fall under the culty kind of umbrella is that you accept Jesus, you do your best to be like him, and you're in. You don't have to earn your way in. You accept, you do your best, but even if you fuck it up royally, you still, like Jesus did
Right.
everything for you. You accept it once, you're good to go, and that you're doing your best because that's just who you want to be, not because you're trying to earn your way in. Whereas with Mormonism, there's a great deal of you have to earn your way. And I think that one of the places that we see that dynamic come out the most is in temple attendance because you cannot go to heaven without going to the temple in Mormonism. And you
Correct.
can't go into the temple unless you are, as Mason, you said earlier, checking all of those boxes. And so when we talk about, I'm going to say in Mormonism, you have to earn your worthiness status. Like if I want to be worthy to go to the temple and I've made the mistake of something like we talk mostly about sexual sin, but let's just say I make the mistake of I overspent my budget and now I can't pay my electric bill. I'm still expected to pay my tithing. And if I don't, I can't go to the temple. So you have to like earn your way in financially. And let's say, maybe I didn't overspend, but Sarah did probably because Sarah likes to spend money. But let's say I didn't overspend and, I've lost a job or I'm just stuck in a rock and a hard place. According to Mormonism, that doesn't really matter. I still have to pay my tithing in order to go to the temple. And if I don't, I'm not worthy to go. And I think that that's kind of where we get into this in Mormonism. You have to earn your place in heaven. And that can be really toxic because also in Mormonism, you're never enough because there's always something else that you need to be doing. And we tend to glorify suffering. And it's like the more you suffer, the harder your life is, the better you are as a human, like endure to the end and glorify all that suffering. And so it really creates that, what's the word I'm looking for? The environment. It's like the perfect environment to create religious scrupulosity or religious OCD, anxiety, depression, and that type of thing. And I love this comment from MJ. It's incredible how constant the threat of losing my forever family was in my life, self-monitoring to not ruin it all. And yeah, I'm gonna agree with you, MJ. Like for me, the thing that kept me going to church, even though I was struggling for almost a decade, was the fear that I was going to completely destroy my family.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very real fear. And that when you look at, if you go back into some of our earlier episodes, like one of the first things, Mason, that your brother number one, the one just younger than you, that we had talked about all those times, like one of the very first threats he made to me when I made the announcement that I was walking away from the church was either I was going to ruin you, Mason, the same way your other brother who doesn't go to church, his wife ruined him. Or what was the other thing? Our marriage was doomed. So it was, Sarah, because of this, your marriage is doomed. Or if your marriage survives, you're going to destroy Mason, just
Right.
like sister-in-law destroyed our other brother because he doesn't attend church.
Right. Well, and you can't, as a religion, or maybe you can, but as a religion, it's very difficult to control people with a multitude of colors. Meaning, if you say to your people, "Hey, you know what? Coffee's really not the best thing for you. Y'all need to just be careful how you do that. You know, if you're gonna use coffee, that's fine, but just be careful. If you're gonna use
Right.
alcohol, be careful. If you're going to masturbate, make sure it doesn't interfere with your marriage." Those are all they're good counsel, but they're not things that I can absolutely, throw the hammer down on and
Right.
say, "I'm sorry, because you did that, you can't go to the temple." Whereas with a church that is trying to control your behavior, that is what you get. You get no coffee. You get no
Right.
alcohol. You must pay your tithing, and it must be 10%, and so on. And so the endowment becomes this thing that you look forward to because it has such a huge impact upon an existential existence that you believe in and have no proof of, really, but you've accepted it as this is reality. You've
Right.
accepted the need for the temple because it's been taught to you from day one. Whether you grew up in the church or you were baptized in later, the temple is taught to you almost from the beginning as this is
Right.
where we're trying to get to.
Right. Well, and so number one, thank you, Shannon Dye, so much for giving us a heart. We absolutely love your support. You've made amazing comments in our Facebook groups and whatnot, and I love how respectful you are in dialogue. So hello, Shannon. Thank you for joining us. And then DJ says 10% plus a generous fast offering. So
Right.
yeah,
Absolutely.
as you're going now, the fast offering I don't think is required for temple attendance, or is it? Do they say that you're generous in your fast offering, Mason? Mr. Bishop Mason?
No. In the temple recommend questions, fast offerings don't come up at all.
Okay. At least they didn't when we were there. So, but yeah, there's a lot of money that is involved that goes into that. So Mason, to kind of close up on just that initial question that I asked you in the beginning, like, so you said you went to the temple, it was a positive experience for you. I'm sure there was a lot of that cognitive bias of this is where I'm supposed to be, this is the next step into my adulthood, and you were, as you said, really excited to serve your mission, which doesn't surprise me at all, because if you guys don't know Mason, I will explain to you that he absolutely loves super bright colors and humans. Mason is very much an extroverted individual. He just, I mean, like, you're very good at that. And so a mission for you is exciting because you weren't uncomfortable with like knocking on doors and just randomly talking to people and striking up conversations. Cause I mean, that's just who you are. Um,
Well, yeah, and can I talk about this comment that Shannon just made too?
Yeah, but before you do, Alex, can you put that up on the screen for us, please? Go ahead, Mace.
So I can't see it. I think this is the same one, but she says, Shannon says, yes, I love this discussion because I was banned from the temple because I refused to forgive my rapist despite paying my tithes for decades. The issue, whether, and there's lots of issues here, but the
Right.
initial issue that I see here, for one, there's no question in the temple recommend questions about whether or not you have forgiven other people. There's not a
Right.
question there. And so what's happened is someone, a bishop, a stake president, a leader of some kind, has taken it upon themselves to demand something of someone because they think it's necessary for your salvation. So the temple is already incredibly restrictive. And now, and this isn't an isolated event. I've heard lots of situations of similar things like this, which is why I
Right.
bring it
Like,
up.
and I think one of the reasons, Mace, that this is so fresh in your mind is we recently listened to the Nick Jones episode on Mormon stories. Nick is is it Nick or Nate? I think it's Nick. Nick is the bishop in Mississippi who resigned from Mormonism from the pulpit
Right.
as a bishop. And one of the things that he talked about is nowhere in the handbook and nowhere in the temple recommend questions are they asking for details. The question is, do you obey the law of chastity?
Right.
And, understandably, from what we've been taught, at least the way I understood it, is that if you were assaulted, and by the way, we need to put a trigger warning on. Alex, remind me later. This is like squirrel. Here's our squirrel. Alex, remind me later. I need to just record a regular trigger warning that we can put up at the beginning because this does come up a lot. And I don't want to be talking in detail about things that are difficult for people. And yes, if you are struggling with suicidal, homicidal ideation, or you are in a mental health crisis, please call or text 988. I've had to do it. I did it. It's been, oh goodness, almost a year ago, I think, since I dialed that number and stayed texting for about 45 minutes until I was ready to be safe again. And I'm very grateful for that because that was so much easier for me than it was to go to the hospital or something because I sat in my bathtub that's my happy place, soaking in my great big soaking tub, which I haven't had for 6 months because of a plumbing leak and an insurance dispute. Squirrel. But I sat in there in the bathtub and texted 988 until I was back in a good mental state. And that saved my life. So please, if anything that we talk about triggers something for you and you end up in a place where you need help, dial 988, talk to them, or text them. Just remember that if you're texting them, when I tried to text them more than like 4 sentences at a time, it kicked back and got returned to me. So small sentences, small text groups, and they will get that for you. So anyway, one of the things that Bishop Jones was talking about was anytime your bishop starts asking you for more detailed responses in that temple recommend interview, he's stepping outside of even what's in the handbook. Like it's none of his damn business. And yet, Shannon, your story's not the only one that
Right.
we've heard where it's like, well, you can't go to the temple because you didn't forgive somebody. Like, is there even a question, Mason, in the temple recommend interview that says, have you forgiven people who have wronged you?
No, there's a question about whether or not you have addressed things that you need to repent of, but there's no question about forgiving others.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, there's direction, or there was when I was a bishop, there was direction on the temple recommend questions that said, essentially, read the questions as they are.
Right.
Don't add information, don't take information away, just read the questions as they are. And it's bothersome enough that it's incredibly restrictive, but it's even more bothersome and incredibly inappropriate now if you start delving into, because if I go into the bishop for my temple recommend, I've gone in because I believe I have to have a temple recommend and then I have to be worthy to go to the temple in order to get back to God. If I were to die tomorrow, I want to die with that temple recommend. There's been lots of people who have talked about that in general conference. And so I have already surrendered some of my authority to this person, this bishop or stake president, whoever I'm meeting with.
Well,
I've already surrendered.
technically you've surrendered it to two people, because in
Yes.
order to get a temple recommend, you go to your bishop, and then you go to your stake president and have the stake president ask all the same questions
Right.
again.
Right. So I've already surrendered my authority to them. I've put myself in a lesser place. And now, if the bishop decides that he wants to go down a rabbit hole of all these other questions, I've been put in this place already. I feel like I have to answer because I've surrendered my authority to this person. Now, do I have to do that? No, absolutely not. But it is what is expected. It is what is happening for most people because they don't have the psychological strength to recognize what is going on and how to avoid that power differential.
Right.
So like Shannon says, I didn't go to the temple. I got banned because I would not do this. That was her taking control of the situation herself. At least from the little bits I know about it, that's what it sounds like. She was saying, look, I'm not doing that. Maybe she even said something along the lines of, that's not in the questions. You're holding back something from me that I want when you don't have the right to do it. But most people are not aware enough in the church to make that kind of a stand and protect themselves.
Right. I think that, one of the other things that really stands out to me here is that by removing the temple recommend, because like the temple is supposed to be the most spiritual place on earth. It's supposed to be the place where you can get closer to God out of any other building. Inside that temple is where you're supposed to be able to be closest to God. And for somebody who has suffered sexual assault, there's a lot of trauma there. It's going to change the way your brain works. Not damage, not break, change.
So let's take a quick commercial break. Unpacking Mormonism will be right back.
The mighty and resilient Merrimack River, carving through the communities of our great region. My name is Linda Lorden, proud president of Merrimack County Savings Bank. And like the river that serves as our namesake, we're a constant yet ever-changing presence. Because to us, it's bigger than banking. It's about powering communities and putting people first. It's about knowing where you came from and where you're going. That's Merrimack style. Visit us at themerrimack.com.
Not all change. I mean, like hard change, yes, but not permanent damage. I hate that we go, oh, something horrible happened to me, now I'm broken. We heal over time. So it changes the way our brain functions, but you're now taking a victim who's been traumatized and not allowing them to go into a building where they've been taught and where their religious culture is that this is where you go to seek forgiveness and counsel and inspiration and a level of closeness with your higher power. And I'm going to remove that from you because you were victimized and you haven't forgiven that person from committing the sin second only to murder in Mormonism. Because again, sexual sin, well, and you didn't commit it, you were a victim of somebody else's sin. Now, I would say sexual assault, like non-consensual sexual contact, in my opinion, I could get behind that being the second most, maybe even the first most serious sin, next to murder, or even equal with murder, depending on the circumstances. But consensual sex, no, not at all. So Mason, I'm going to jump
Right.
back again to our original question. Did you learn anything in the temple that you didn't already know on
I
that
think that
temple experience for the
I
endowment? Go ahead.
I think that at the time I probably felt like I did. Looking back, I would say no. I don't think that there was. Well, I take that back. So the first time you go through the temple, there's lots of details added to the Adam and Eve story and how things went down in the Garden of Eden, how they went down after the Garden of Eden. There's lots of details in there that are new. There's some of them, most of them are in the Book of Moses, which is Joseph Smith's retranslation of the beginning part of Genesis. And I knew all of that pretty well, but there are some details that were different. I don't know that they're necessarily really important details, but there were details that were different. Looking back now, I don't really feel like I learned anything important from the temple. And I would say that the same every time I went back after that, particularly after I'd been back 3 or 4 times. I have a really good memorization memory. I had the temple endowment ceremony basically memorized after just a few visits.
Which
So
is why
then
you
you're
slept
just
so often through it as
right.
you got
It's
older.
just numbing. It's just numbing after that. It's like if you go in, and I think this is why people still get by in there. If you go in expecting to have some sort of spiritual experience, and you put yourself in a place where you can communicate with God or whatever you believe is out there, the temple's as good a place as any to have that kind of conversation. And for some people, it will be the best place because that's what they've been taught is the case. But if you set yourself up for spiritual communication and your place, like for you, Sarah, your place is being out in nature, nature is going to do the same thing for you. You're not learning anything new from being in the temple. It's just providing you an opportunity to communicate with whatever you consider to be holy. And you can do that anywhere.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'm gonna answer my own questions. And Mason, I'd like for you to look at the private chat because I asked you a question that I would like for you to respond to. And that in your video, you can touch on it, and your video won't go away, by the way, when you do that, since we're trying this on the phones. But I think for me, number one, for me, I really struggled. For me, the endowment is what was expected of me, and I actually, Alex, if you can pull up that image that I sent you with the temple in it really quick, the families are forever picture that I sent you. For me, what I wanted more than any, Mason's laughing at my picture. What I wanted more than anything else from the time I was little, I mean, even today, is unconditional love and acceptance from my family. And since I didn't get that as a small child, and I still don't have that from my family of origin. Like my mom, who's not supposed to be contacting me, contacted me again. And this morning I was all discombobulated and frustrated and having feels because she's trying to open things up. And I'm just like, no, I need that. I need that space. But I wanted, the reason that I continue to go to the temple is very similar to what MJ said earlier, which is I just wanted my family to be together forever. And for me, it was, I'm going to do this because this is the step I have to take in order to show up and be the type of parent that the church says we are supposed to be. And I
Yes.
can't do that without the temple. So for me, rather than it being a check mark, it was more like I'm going to go here and I'm going to learn what it is that obviously my parents have gone here and they haven't taken that lesson because of the abuse and the other things that were going on in my home. And so when I went in, I was really disappointed. Now, the couple of things that I earned, and I'm gonna comment on MJ's comment that was just up on the screen here in a minute, because that was one of the things that really stood out for me as well, MJ. So I'm gonna come to that. So I remember, going through the temple. The other thing is that I had all this family here, and because I was getting married, like I went, I think, on a Saturday, and then Mason, you and I got married like the next Friday or Thursday or something. I don't remember all of the time frame. I went through the temple either on May 30th or May 31st of 99 for the first time. Go to the Temple Oracle website and you'll figure out what day I went through the first time based on what we're going to be talking about here in a little bit. But when I went through the temple, like my parents, my mom is very much a task oriented. We're going to get this done. And if there's people coming in, that's going to increase her level of anxiety. And so we did the endowment session. And then after my going through the temple, we had some luncheon or something family wise that was going on for all of these people that were visiting for our wedding, because I was the first grandchild on my mom's side of the family who, quote unquote, did it right, which was a huge badge of honor for my mom because I was the first grandchild on that side of my family to get married in the temple. And that was, but like my mom, Mason, when I when I had sex at 16, um, I it was like my parents had lost me forever. Like the way that response was like there was never going to be a comeback from that. And then my parents restricted everything about my life. Like I was basically captive in my own home for several months. And then as those freedoms began to come back, it was very much on the understanding that if I did not obey every single thing that my parents said I needed to do, my captivity would be reinstated, and I would not be allowed to leave my home without a parent by my side. So I literally was held captive in my own home. And so I was very obedient after my parents discovered that I'd had sex until I married Mason, because I had to be in order for my survival. And so, but then because my parents had policed me so much during those subsequent 2 years, I had all this family coming in, and it was, look how amazing Sarah is. She's the best. She's the hero. She's turned her life around. So can everybody else. I also grew up very much with the understanding that my dad was in charge and women didn't have a say in anything. My mom never stood up to my dad, blah, 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 blah. So I remember the first thing that really stood out to me in the temple. The first thing that I would say was even a positive experience was that in the temple video, so you watch this video, you get the voice of God or Elohim, and then your voice of Jesus, whatever, and Adam, and they create the world and they create mankind and whatnot. Well, when they're in the Garden of Eden, Satan comes to Eve. We talked about this with America and Julia from Analyzing Mormonism. And that basically Satan says, and he's a man, not a snake, but he says to Eve, the only way for you to obey God's commandments of procreate and replenish the earth is for you to eat the apple. And in that video, Eve contemplates the reality of that experience. And the thing that's really interesting to me, and the reason I've got this up, the lies are forever, is that in Mormonism, we have that your war in heaven is, Jesus versus Satan's plan. Satan says, we're going to pull what Sarah's parents did after she had sex. We're going to make everybody be obedient, and then I'm going to get a pat on the back for that. Good job. That is exactly what my parents did to me. It was, we made Sarah be obedient. Now she's in the temple. Woo, look at her, right? And then Jesus's plan was, you're going to go down, you're going to have free will, and the glory's going to be to God. And yet we give all of the glory to Jesus. Like we're not even allowed to speak God's name in Mormonism, unless we're saying, "Dear Heavenly Father" at the beginning of a prayer. Like any time other than I'm addressing God in prayer, we're not supposed to glorify Him out loud. All of the praise goes to Jesus. And so, as I'm watching the temple video, Satan's the one that's being honest, and God is the one that's lying to Adam and Eve. And I remember that really standing out for me. But what was so beautiful is that the person who figured it out and made the quote unquote right choice in order to allow the rest of humankind to exist was Eve. Like Adam's a dumb shit who's just checking off the boxes. Like God said, no, I can't disappoint God. Oh my gosh, I can't do that, right? And then Eve is the one that has a brain in her head and is like, oh my goodness, I've got two conflicting commandments. And so it's Eve that thinks through that, and it's Eve that brings all of that about. So, Alex, if you can pull MJ's comment back up. MJ says, the story of Eve is what helped me give myself permission to act. And she says, step away from the church and trust that my actions is in an impossible position would be redeemable. And I love that because I learned the same thing. From that temple, I learned if Adam hadn't listened to Eve, according to Mormonism, humanity would have ceased to exist. And it brings me back to that line from my big fat Greek wedding where she says the man is the head of the household and the woman is the neck, and the woman can turn the head any direction she wants to. And for me, watching that it was actually Eve that did things made me feel special. And for the first time ever in my Mormon existence, I felt valuable as a woman for something other than being a baby maker. And so that's the positive that I gained from that experience in the temple. Go ahead, Mason. You raised your hand. So
Yeah. I
Alex,
love
go
that.
ahead and you can get rid of this picture if you want to, and then I'll have it pulled up here again in a minute. Go ahead, Mace.
I love that because something about the temple ceremony really helped you see something from a different perspective. The problem is that just after that happens, God and Jesus are talking about what's happened, and the line that is said, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it says, but it says something along the lines of, inasmuch as Eve was the first to partake, if she'll covenant now to be obedient, it'll be all okay. And for
Mhm.
6,000 years, that has been the impetus for men to control women. It was
Yeah.
Eve's fault that we're in this place.
No.
So,
It
sucks for
was
you.
Eve who made sure that our plan actually worked the way that it was intended to do, and because she did it, we shall punish her forever.
Right. Well, and there's lots of details. Of
Because
course,
she's
you're
gonna
talking.
now, because now childbirth is gonna be painful, and blah, 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 blah.
Right. Whatever the changes, we don't know what it would have been like if Eve hadn't made that decision. But the point is that it has been used. And we're talking about the things that you learned in the temple. You're talking about that comes from Mormonism. Like
Right,
that's not in the Bible. It doesn't
right,
say anything in the Bible about how Eve recognized that she needed to do that. It only says that she
right.
listened to Satan and did it. She is the bad guy in Christianity. And I
Well, and
love the
so
fact,
pause. What MJ said is Eve was in an impossible situation.
right,
God gave Eve, according to Mormonism, God gave Eve Adam and Eve, two options. And they could not honor both rules without breaking a commandment. Like God did
right,
that to them on purpose. What a fucking jerk. Frankly, that's how, like,
right,
as a parent, if I'm like, you have to clean your bedroom and my kitchen at the exact same time, well, now pick which room you're going to clean, because it doesn't matter which room you clean first and which room you clean second. You're in trouble for having not finished one guy. And so it's just that dichotomy of God. In Mormonism, God made it impossible for Adam and Eve to fulfill both commandments. And I think that that's like when with MJ's comment, she talks about she could be redeemed from her actions because of an impossible situation. My issue is the man, head honcho dude, made it impossible for Eve to make a good decision, or Adam for that matter. And Adam was like, I'm just going to keep swimming. I'm just going to keep swimming. I'm just going to do whatever, Oh, God, you said this. Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. No thought to it. And in the temple, Eve is the one that's like, this doesn't make any sense. Well, I think that this commandment's probably more important than that one. So I'm going to go ahead and break that one to follow this one. And now I'm punished forever, and man will be in charge of me forever. Go ahead, Mason.
yeah, I mean, and there's a difference between Christianity, mainstream, and Mormonism,
Right.
And the reason I brought that up is because in the temple, that was a positive lesson. I feel like in a lot of ways, Eve is given a little bit more of what her probable character was in the temple. Shannon made a comment that Eve was not the bad guy in Christianity, and I would be interested to know, Shannon, a little bit more what you mean by that, because if you look at Catholicism,
So
they
pause.
baptize.
Catholicism is not considered Christianity. So what Shannon would be talking about would be
Whoa. Catholicism is original Christianity. Catholicism is the church that was developed first from Jesus Christ and his apostles. It was Christianity for over 1,000 years without any other alternative.
Okay, so modern day Christianity does not look at Catholicism as a Christian church for whatever reason. So that, at least that's my understanding from most
Well,
of the clients that I've worked with. So
okay.
I think that let's allow Shannon to answer the question. Um,
Well,
because what Shannon has said, yes, here's Shannon's comment, is that's not how my understanding of how God works. So that's not my understanding of how God works. He doesn't cause you to sin. And in Mormonism, God absolutely caused Adam and Eve to sin. There was no way out, because Mormon doctrine is that if they hadn't eaten the fruit, they would not have been able to have babies because they were too innocent to have sex.
whereas in Christianity, what? In Christianity, they don't have any kind of an understanding, period, of what would or would not have occurred. Simply that God said don't do it and they did it.
I'm going to actually challenge you on that, Mason, because your understanding of modern day Christianity is based on what Mormonism has taught you Christians believe. Like,
No,
where is your
no,
experience of regular Christianity? Okay.
that's my experience. If you look at the scriptures, if you read Genesis, there is no understanding of what happened in that garden except that Eve partook of the fruit and they were kicked out. That's
Okay.
it. That's it. There is no other understanding from a scriptural point. If you hold to the Bible as scripture, there is no other understanding. And I respect if Shannon and whatever, the way that she is living Christianity, she has a different understanding of it. That's fine. I don't have any issues with that. But if you're looking at the story of Adam and Eve from a scriptural perspective, you have Genesis. That's all. There is no other explanation of the story. There is no other
I'm going to
added
say
details.
in interpretation. So basically what I hear you saying, Mason, is Genesis doesn't describe the reasoning, and so that would be up to individual religiosity, pastor's interpretation to describe why and what happened. And then
Correct.
Shannon says that her understanding is that Adam would have been responsible for Eve's actions because he is the head, which I'm going to say is very much that, again, that patriarchal system of if Eve makes a mistake, somehow Adam is responsible for that, which my understanding or my interpretation of that would be, why can't the man and the woman be individuals separate and apart from each other, responsible for their own mistakes? And yes, Shannon, I know we're like way off topic again. Mason does not want to talk about what we're here to talk about today. So we need another squirrel, Alex, because we are now all over the place and not talking about the temple again. And so, Shannon, I'm going to say that because, I mean, we know who you are. You know where I sleep. Maybe you need to come and visit us and we can absolutely start to talk. But, Mason, I would caution you as your loving wife here. You are speaking right now in absolutes based on your interpretation and your understanding. And I would say in a manner that really discredits and minimizes our viewers' other opinions. What you're saying is very much a belief system and an understanding of other people's belief systems based on your experiences and your reading and your interpretations of the Bible. And I'm going to say that as somebody who was born and raised in Mormonism, I don't understand the Bible outside of my Mormon upbringing because I've never studied or read it outside of my Mormon lens. And so I'm just going to say, Mason, I love you. Proceed with caution and pay attention to the verbiage you're using, because in my opinion, it definitely sounds very exclusive, very much I'm right, you're wrong. I think it would be wise for you to use your Gottman skills. And the way I understand it, I've heard my reading of it, my interpretation of it would be super wise. And I love you. He's smiling.
Okay.
He's gonna take some deep breaths. So anyway, so my first experience in the temple, or the first really the first thing that I would say that I learned from my Mormon temple experience is that Eve was the brains of the operation. But then, as Mason said, in the very next breath, Eve expressed her opinion, her thoughts. She exerted action into making a decision, and then she's punished for it. And for me, that really tracked with who I was as a woman. Because Mason is, I'm turning to you, Mason, because you can kind of vouch for this. My experiences with my father, my earthly father, and then with Mason's earthly father in the um in the beginning of our marriage was that if I spoke up, if I gave my opinion, I'm a woman, I have a vagina, if I used my brain out loud, I was obnoxious, I was annoying, it was wrong, and I would get silenced or punished for it. But if Mason reworded my opinion as his own, it was brilliant, it was wise, it was what the family would follow. And one of the things, Mason, that I would say I've noticed in just our marriage in general is that when I'm in the background, like, hey, Mason, I think it would be wise for you to approach your family and share this idea, blah, 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 blah. And you do that. Your father, especially, I mean, all of your siblings, and well, not all of them now, but all of them when they were younger, it was like, oh, Mason has spoken this great thing. What a wise person. But really, it was Mason was repeating the things you and I had talked about in private. And because you said it rather than me, it was brilliant. But if I said it, and even if you agreed with me, it was worthless. And I would say with several of your family members, that's still the case. Specifically, your father and two of your brothers, and one of your sisters. So that was kind of my, like, I was like, this for me, as I continued to attend the temple, I was like, this silencing of women's voices and punishing them for being wise is a part of Mormon heritage because it played out right in the middle. And Shannon, thank you so much for your comment. I really appreciate this. Mason, that I said that, and Shannon said, what a hard and brave conversation. Thank you. One of the things that and Mason, I'll be quiet here after this and let you speak up. One of the things that I've always valued the most about Mason's in my marriage is that when I call him out on maybe something that I think is not necessarily appropriate, he scowls and kind of goes, "Rrr." And then about 2 minutes later, he's like, Sarah's right. Or I'm going to take that. It's not just that Sarah's right. That was narcissistic. That was a little narcissistic. More like Sarah has a point. I'm going to try and navigate that and take that into advisement and move from there, and then vice versa. Although Mason takes 1 or 2 minutes with the grumpy face, and I probably take more like an hour to an hour and a half with the before I'm able to go, okay, yes, Mason has a point. So what you're seeing on screen right now, Mason, would you say that that's part of our normal stuff? And then also please add any comments or thoughts that you have regarding what I just said about the Adam Eve story being kind of a type for our continued experiences in Mormonism. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, your timelines maybe not so much. It usually takes me more than just a couple of minutes, but it just depends on the situation too. In this case, I'm giving my interpretation of Christianity as a whole because it's based on what is written in the Bible. That doesn't mean, and I don't mean to imply that every Christian church takes it that way. Like Mormonism has moved away from that black and white perspective of what is in Genesis about the Garden of Eden as well. That's what we're talking about, is the temple and the expanded vision of what happened there, both positive and negative. I think there's some very positive things that come in kind of a redemption of what Eve did. Mm-hmm. And there's some negative things because it still kind of leads to less equality than they claim that they want.
Are you
And
saying the Mormon version is less equality than they claim that they want? Is that what you mean by that?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I think that what I meant by Christianity is that if you base your opinion of the sexes and how they fall together off of the very beginning of what you would call history, because most Christianity bases their understanding of history off of the Bible, then your first experience with men and women is the story of Adam and Eve and how God then punishes them for what they did. And it's a very unequitable distribution of punishment. The woman is the bad guy. It says it right here. It says, this is Genesis chapter 3. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. If that isn't a placement of where the power belongs, I don't know what is. Now, if Christianity and some sects of Christianity have moved away from that, that's great. That's a positive thing. I don't think there's supposed to be an inequality, but the Bible, at least the one I grew up with, maybe it's a little different in some of the other Bibles, and I will claim ignorance to that. In fact, if you had your red Bible, I think it's in that office. I'd be interested to read that maybe after this is done.
Oh, no.
But
I'll be right back.
But anyway, the point being that if you're going by the scriptures clearly, at least in the King James Version, delineate that the man rules over the woman, and it is stated unequivocally because of what happened in the Garden of Eden. Mormonism.
All right, what did you just read, babe? Genesis what?
It's Genesis 3, 16. Genesis 3:16.
All right, my red Bible is the New Oxford Annotated Bible. I absolutely love this one, and it comes with the Apocrypha. I love this one because it's got kind of an academic and historical, like it's kind of like the all-inclusive Bible. And I learned about this Bible from my very most favoritist podcaster in the world, John Larson, the gloriously unfiltered guest on Mormon Stories. He's my fave. Hi, John. Okay. And he has no idea who I am, but I love him. All right. To the woman, he said, I will greatly increase your pangs in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children, yet your desires shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. And to the man he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife. Ooh, I like this. And this makes, what does your verse 17 say? All right. In verse 17 of the
just
Bible.
keep reading yours and then I'll read mine.
Okay, and to the man he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree about which I command you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. So Adam's labors in the field and the ground is because he listened to his wife. Damn it, don't listen to your wife or you're going to have more chores. Okay. That's a joke. I'm being sarcastic. You shall not eat of it.
But hold on. You're being sarcastic about it, but that's exactly how I read it. My sorrow is because of you. I have to work hard now because of the choice you made. And there is, from the very beginning, an inequality that is put forth. And that's what really, that just disturbs me because this inequality of the sexes has a scriptural base. That Bible, this Bible, they're very similar. I think the interpretation is the same. That is an inequality set forth by God.
Right. Well, and I'm going to say, and I'm going to read, Alex, leave MJ's comment up there because I'm going to come back to that here in like 1 second. So if I keep reading this, so from 17, I'm now halfway through it. Cursed is the ground because of you. So cursed is the ground, Adam, for you because you listened to your damn wife.
So let's take a quick commercial break. Unpacking Mormonism will be right back.
The world's most exciting podcast, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, New York Times best-selling author and National Radio Hall of Fame inductee, Michael Savage.
I'm Michael Savage, host of the Savage Nation podcast, home of borders, language, and culture. Be here or be nowhere. The Savage Nation podcast.
Catch the Michael Savage podcast on all podcast platforms every Tuesday and every Friday.
Right.
In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life, thorns and thistles that shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field by the sweat of your face. Ye shall eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. And then we move out of that. The man named his wife Eve because she was the mother of all living, so on and so forth. And then God gives them skins of clothing. And really my takeaway from this section of the temple was, oh, it's okay to blame the woman. Like, this wasn't my conscious thought, but this is why I put up with being blamed by my father and your father for, if I speak my mind and the man listens to me, everything that happens that's bad is now my fault. And that's because this is what was modeled for me throughout Mormonism. And then I love MJ's comment here that said, where she says, I had a friend come to church years ago in gospel principles. So in Mormonism, gospel principles is you're brand new to the church. So we are taking you all the way back to the primary years you missed. So we are going to talk about the absolute most basic things of the scriptures at all. That's what gospel principles is in Mormonism. So in gospel principles class, we discussed the Garden of Eden. My Christian friend commented that Eve was a dingbat and screwed mankind. So whatever the scriptures say, that was his takeaway. And I would say, MJ, yeah, most of the people that I've talked to, not all, but most of the people that I've spoken to, they're upset with Eve. It was like, Eve, what the hell did you do? Why did you do this? But I also believe that most of Christianity believes that if Eve hadn't done that, they still would have had children and they would have lived forever in peace in the Garden of Eden.
Right.
Whereas in Mormonism, God said, don't eat of that fruit. And Mormonism believes that if they hadn't, no children could be born.
Right.
And I think that that's where the big disparity is that in most of Christianity, God didn't set it up as an impossibility. In Mormonism, it was set up as an impossibility. What I learned was that Eve made the best in the temple. What I learned was Eve made the best choice for mankind to exist and was punished for it. But the fact that she thought about it and that her husband listened to her and that he, toiled with her and went with her, because he literally was like, I don't want to lose you. I see that this must be, was his exact words. And then out into the world they went. And for me, it was like as equal partners. But then as I got older and older, that's when I was like, there is no equality in the Mormon church for women, period. The other thing that I took away, Mace, did you have anything else you wanted to say before we move on to the next thing that I learned in the temple?
No, I agree with what you're saying there. I think that in general, Christianity has that idea. I love that Shannon has a different idea. I love that what she has learned is that Eve wasn't the bad guy. I think that's terrific.
Right.
I don't think it's scriptural, but I think it's a terrific interpretation.
Right, it's a nuanced view of
the
Bible.
And I think that that's great. It's just not scriptural, and part of that, with my issue with Mormonism in general,
it's not scriptural in the way you understand them.
It's not scriptural. It's not scriptural from either of the Bibles we just read. I don't think that there's a different interpretation for that. I think someone has grown, and I think that's great. I'm just saying, and part of my issue with Mormonism is that if you try and rectify the scriptures, even with the temple, there's differences there. And so as religions try and control the way that you do things, if their control doesn't match what you also believe from the scriptures or whatever, there's problems there, and that's where we kind of start to notice some of the issues here.
Right. So, and I love this comment. So, for those who are watching live, you can see that this Shannon and us share a last name. That's because this is the sister in law that ruined her husband, according to Mason's brother number one. So Shannon, you and I are Westbrook boy ruiners together. In spirit, we like to ruin the men of the Westbrook household. Love you so much, girly. But one of the things that Shannon is confirming here is that she's also heard her husband repeat that same idea as well. As God is going to make you sin to follow his commandments. And then Shannon's question is, that's evil. Why would God do that? And I agree. And here we go. Oh, sheesh. Yes, Shannon. Shannon's like, oh, sheesh. What else did they say about us? Like I said, Shannon, it's time for us to have another sister-in-law cousin get together. Because yeah, this is where things are so much so much fun. And she says, haha, that's really funny. Yes, we are Shannon and I are Shannon Westbrook and Sarah Westbrook are the Westbrook man ruiners, according to certain members of the family, which makes me giggle. And then the other Shannon that has been commenting says there are so many versions of the Bible, but they all have the same chapters. Excluded. Makes me feel like someone's own opinions fit the narrative and push their ideology. Have you explored reading the excluded books and chapters in the Bible? So Shannon, if you could, so this is the other Shannon. Shannon, if you could talk about what those other books of scriptures and the excluded ones are, I think that would really help our readers know what you're talking about. The ones that I've read are in, again, this book here, the New Oxford Annotated Bible, which has the Apocrypha in it. And I think that includes something. It also has maps. Like, I love this Bible. This is my favorite Bible. And it could be because I'm a John Larson fan club junkie. Go ahead,
So
Mason. Before we get back into the temple,
no,
remember
so
our goal is temple.
I want to go back to the temple. What I feel like happened is the narrative exists that this power differential that comes from Genesis. In the temple, it's almost like they try to take that away. They say a few things that make it seem like there's equality between the sexes. They kind of justify why Eve made the decision that she made and show why it was necessary. But if you really follow the whole narrative, that equality is not that inequality is not really taken away. So it's almost like it's one of those give them an inch, take a mile kind of thing. Let's make
That's
it
called
feel
gaslighting.
like what? Yeah.
Gaslighting.
Make it feel like things are different when in reality the same control exists. It's
Right.
just softer. It's just
Right.
softer. And so
Go ahead,
I
I'm
think
sorry.
I think that's kind of the problem with the temple then is that you're making it feel like something is different when in reality, if you have the ability to step back and think about it, it's really not.
Right. And I think that the Mormon church is really good at that. I think that they do that a lot. And one of the examples is this meme right here that I saw the other day on social media. It's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Like, I've had this happen. I actually have one of the reviews that I got on my book was, oh my gosh, I love this. What a great story. And then they went and listened to the podcast. And then they came back out and they were like, oh my gosh, this girl uses the word Mormon, like unpacking Mormonism, on purpose with sarcasm to harm the church. And I was like, that's hilarious, because I grew up in the church as a Mormon, like President Monson. So Thomas S. Monson was like, be proud to be a Mormon, and being a Mormon is a good thing. And Gordon B. Hinckley talking about Mormon is an honorable nickname. And then the hundreds of millions of dollars that were spent on the I'm a Mormon campaign under Thomas S. Monson. And then Thomas S. Monson dies. Rusty Nelson ascends to the throne of Mormonism, and suddenly utilizing the term that we've used for almost 200 years, more than 200 years, is a victory for Satan. And now we have this dynamic. It's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as if the last 200 years of our history doesn't matter. And then I'm the snarky cat because I am totally a snarky cat on some of these. I will say that review of I use the term Mormon, not as a way to harm the church, but as a way to be like, no, this is who we were. This is who I was when I was a part of it. I have never been a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I've been a member of the Mormon Church because growing up, the only time I used the full name of the church was when I was marching home from elementary school singing, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I know who I am. I know God's plan. Yeah, that's the only time I use the full name of the church. Every other time I was Mormon, and I was taught to be proud of being Mormon. And so it's that gaslighting effect, Mason, that you're talking about of we're going to give you this little teeny nugget of look at how wise Eve was. And in the next breath, take it away. And then Shannon says, so Shannon Dye says, yes, the Apocrypha, Esther, etc. She started reading the missing chapters, and so glad to see your version has them. Yes, one of the things, Shannon, so this is a cute little squirrel moment here, is that if you read the Apocrypha, you're going to see a little bit of like origin story of the Book of Mormon. Like Joseph Smith said the Apocrypha is not an inspired book, but then when you go and read the Book of Mormon, guess what? There's a lot of stuff in there that came, storylines and whatnot, similarities, not plagiarism, but a lot of similarities from that in the Book of Mormon. And that's a whole other podcast episode. All right, so the other thing, Mason, are you good if I move forward? All right, the other thing that I learned that first time in the temple was that God was a liar. So now I've got another God is a liar. So again, when we go to this, the lies are forever inside the temple. And that is that in the Doctrine and Covenants, Joseph Smith taught that the way for me to know a true messenger from God versus a non-true messenger from God is to reach out and shake their hand. And if I can feel their hand in my hand, it means they are a true messenger from God that has lived on the earth and died and been resurrected. If I extended my hand and said, shake my hand, and they reached into my hand and I couldn't feel it, that meant I was communing with somebody, an angel of darkness or the devil. Nope, not that one. Not yet, Alex. Woo! Alex, like, spoiler alert, we're getting there. And then if I wanted, if they were not born yet, they would, and so they haven't lived on the earth, they haven't died, and they haven't been resurrected, then they would say, I cannot touch you because it hasn't happened yet. And then the example for us to follow through with that is the story of Jesus Christ moving the tomb, or moving the stone away from the tomb. Jesus comes out. Mary is like, oh, Jesus. And he says, don't touch me. I have not yet ascended to heaven. And what Joseph Smith was asserting was that if you tried to touch Jesus before he ascended to heaven, he would have just been a personage of spirit and you wouldn't have been able to feel him. So that would have been like I'm going to say the normal, like Casper the ghost. You're going to fall right through Jesus because he hasn't gone to heaven yet. So you're going to be like, bumping into a ghost there. And so after Jesus ascended to heaven and then came back down, that was the resurrection, then people could touch him and feel him. And that's where that teaching, for me anyway, that was the teaching. And then this is how we're reinforcing that teaching using the New Testament. And in the temple video, Peter, James, and John enter the scene to teach Adam further light and knowledge. And Adam says to them, you got to give me a sign or a token. You got to give me the secret handshake. All right, Alex, now you can put up my secret handshakes. And the handshake that he's supposed to give is this top one. So for you guys, that would be the top left corner as you're looking at it. That is the secret handshake that Peter, James, and John give Adam before they will teach him further light and knowledge. And the name of this, so every secret handshake comes with a name and a token and a sign, right? Name, token, sign, Mason. So this is the token.
Correct.
This is the token. And then the sign is you hold your hand in different shapes. that emulated the, as we talked about last time with America and Julia, like the slitting of the throat, the cutting of the bowels, and your hand signs are very much coming from Masonry. But you're supposed to give this first handshake, and this first handshake is you clasp each other's hands, and this little bendy part in your thumb knuckle is supposed to sit on top of the first finger knuckle of the other person's hand. And the name of this sign and token is, oh, Alex, I forgot to send you this picture. I'm going to send the picture here in a minute. Mason, did you want to have something to say about what I learned so I can disappear from the screen real quick and send the name of this token? Because it's pretty hilarious how this came up in our house the other day. So Mason, go ahead. I'm going to let you. Don't give the secret name of it yet,
I just gonna
because
go ahead. I got it. I just was going to talk about the fact that, you know, this is one of the things where you're talking about God lying, this idea of how you can tell if somebody is a real person or a bad or a good spirit or whatever. But there's other instances, just to go back and make it more clear. You talked about God saying that if you eat of this tree, then you shall surely die. And it's just not true. I think that religion finds easy ways to just kind of discredit that statement, but the reality is the statement wasn't true. He says, "In the day thou eatest of."
Oh yeah, go ahead, keep going.
He says, "In the day thou eatest of it, thou shalt surely die." You know, I certainly make that sound as if you eat it, you're gonna die, you know, right away.
Lies
And
are
people have an easy way of just discrediting it and saying, well, God meant in his day. Okay, fine, maybe that's true, but that's not what was said.
Right.
And so just the idea that it's almost like God doesn't hardly tell any truths in the temple video. And you mentioned it before that everything that Satan says is
right.
true. And
Was
so
true.
yeah, there's this idea that anyway, so that's
Well, and
all I was gonna say to that.
the truth is supposed to set you free. So technically, in the Mormon origins story of Adam and Eve, Satan is the one that set them free. And then
Yeah.
we're supposed to give the glory to God, but who do we give all of the glory to? Jesus.
Yeah.
Everything is about the Savior's atonement. We pray to Jesus. Jesus is our advocate. We're trying to be more like Jesus. Like everything is praise going to Jesus Christ. And it makes sense if they're a Trinity, meaning if Jesus is just the same as God, and then you're giving the glory to Jesus. Well, you're giving the glory to God in human form, but Mormonism doesn't do that. Mormonism has them as two separate beings, and now the story of the war in heaven gets all confusing because now we've got to punish God's oldest son for somebody else's mistakes, despite the fact that the second article of faith says, "You shall be punished for your own sins and not Adam's transgression." So Jesus should be punished for his sins. He doesn't have any. So it just becomes very convoluted and confusing.
Yeah.
But yes, in the temple, unfortunately, in the Mormon temple, God is the liar, Satan is the truth teller, and this is apparently a good thing. But on the handshakes thing, we have this is our token. This is the top left handshake. So the knuckle of the thumb is on the knuckle of the first finger of both the giver and the receiver. And Alex, I don't know if you got that picture. Oh, he did. And the name of this token, oh, whoops. Alex, you do it. I just took it away because I was getting ahead of myself. Is this, and this is a really funny story. So this is Mason's and my oldest biological son, Hayden. He is 17. He is leaving me at the end of this school year to go to college, and I'm super sad. But this is our son, and he was wearing yellow. There was a young man in his school that passed away over the holidays, and very tragic. And it was that young man's birthday, and so everybody in the school, not everybody, but most of the students in the school wore yellow because it was that young man's favorite color. And Hayden only had, if you look at the very bottom of that picture, yellow socks. And so he came out and I was like, dude, that's not enough yellow. I've got the perfect shirt for you. And this bright yellow shirt is a Mason shirt because, as I said earlier, Mason loves bright colors. Mason has a pair of pants that are the same color yellow. That's what I saw him in the first time we met. Very loud outfit wear, Mason. So I gave the shirt to my son Hayden. I said, here, you can wear this shirt today to honor that student. And Hayden came out and he said, I look like the sun. And I started laughing hysterically because number one, yes, that yellow is pretty darn yellow to shame the sun. But the secret name of that first token is the Son, meaning the Son of God. So later in the temple, when you're at the veil, they're going to say, give us the first token of the Aaronic priesthood. You're going to give this handshake, top left corner. And then the dude behind the veil is going to say, has it a name? And you're going to say, it has. And then you're going to say, the Son. And then you move on. So I love that the son of my manly God, Mason, not really, but the son was wearing the sun shirt. Here we go. There you go. Now you guys are going to remember it because I gave you some associations to remember it by.
Well, then you better say it right because that's not correct.
Oh, well, then you go ahead and correct me, Mr. Photographic Memory Memorizer dude. Go.
That's the token of the one on the bottom left. The first token of the Melchizedek priesthood is the sun.
Oh, you're right. I'm totally ahead of myself.
Oh, I know
Okay.
I'm right. I'm just
Scratch
glad you know
that.
it now.
Hang on, let me do a Willy Wonka movement. Scratch that, rewind. Okay, the name of this first one is your given name.
No,
You're correct.
it's your new
Yes.
name.
No, it's your given name, and then the top right is the new name.
No.
Okay, Mason's right. I'm wrong, probably. So this just proves that I haven't been in the temple a little while. Okay, this means that I can no longer get into the Mormon heaven because I got them all mixed up. But the good
Well,
news is that if I
somebody will
repent,
be there
somebody will
helping you,
stand
right?
behind my shoulder and tell me the right one. All right, so the first one is the new name. And Mason, did you see my comment in the private chat?
Yeah, I saw your comment.
But you didn't give me an answer, so I need an answer before I do this.
Sure.
All right, so if this one is the new name, I'm sorry. So Mason, can you go ahead and repeat to us what is the token of the Aaronic you put your hands through the veil and you do what, Mason? Go.
You put your hands to the veil and you make that token. You do that handshake. And God, who is represented on the other side of the veil, asks, what is that? So you say it's the first token of the Aaronic priesthood, and he asks, does it have a name? And you say it does, and he says, well, you give it to me. And then you say, I will. Why is Mark Harmon on the screen?
Just keep going. I'll fix it. Just keep going.
You say, I will through the veil. And then you tell him the name, which is your new name.
And Mason's is Jethro Gibbs.
Okay, I get it. Gotcha. Jethro Gibbs. Okay.
So
Very
this is
nice.
Jethro.
Very
This
nice.
is not
Good
Mark
addition.
Harmon. This is Gibbs because my favorite role of Mark Harmon is Jethro Gibbs. And in the Saturday Flippy one, what is that one called, Mason? Where he plays the stepdad that's getting married.
Freaky Friday.
Freaky Friday, but the new one. That's my other favorite role of Mark Harmon. So Jethro is Mason's, and then everybody who's been there around. So my answer to that question would be Phoebe. Okay. Phoebe Buffet. All right. So there's our new names. Now we're going to hell forever and ever and ever because we have given that new name. We shall die now. Okay.
So let's take a quick commercial break. Unpacking Mormonism will be right back.
And then our second token of the Aaronic priesthood. So then you learn a little bit more in the temple, blah, blah, blah. You get your second token of the Aaronic priesthood, which is the top right corner. It looks almost identical, except the knuckle of your thumb is now in between the space of the first and second knuckle. And that one is your first given name in birth. So for me, that would be Sarah. For Mason, that would be Douglas, because those were the names that our parents gave us. Mason goes by his middle name. And there's also a covenant that goes with all of these. And I think the first one Mace, what's the covenant that goes with the first
The
one? Is that one the obedience, right?
No, the covenant that goes along with the token is just that you will not reveal the token or its name or sign.
Oh yeah, I just broke that. Okay, and then the covenant with the second one?
It's the
is
same
that one?
thing. It's the same covenant.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you're talking about covenants that you make in progression, there are
Yeah, when I
some.
raise my hand to the square and I bow my head and I say yes.
Yeah,
A covenant to obey.
that is just so you do covenants like the covenant to be obedient, the law of the gospel, the law of sacrifice, the law of chastity. You do those kind of in a progression as you get this information, but the covenant that you're making about the token is specifically about the token.
Right,
Like you're
I'm never
making a
going to
covenant,
reveal it.
right? And you use the name of that token in that covenant that says, I will never reveal the token, the meaning, the name, or the sign. Not the meaning, the token, the name, or the sign.
Right.
So you're just making a covenant, along with the covenants of obedience and so on, you're making a covenant with each token that you will not ever reveal that token, its name, or its sign.
Right. And in a recent interview, or I don't know, it's, what's secret or sacred, and then what's the difference between secret and sacred, and we don't really know what the difference is. This is the part of the temple that you're not supposed to reveal. Everything else technically can be talked about. Like I can go out and say, I promised in the temple that I wouldn't sleep with anybody other than the man that I'm legally and lawfully wedded to.
Right.
And I don't think lightning's going to strike me. But now that I've done this podcast, I'm going down, y'all, because I just told you this. And for anybody who's a Mason or knows things about Masonry, this is why we're saying, hey, Mormonism comes or has, borrowed heavily from Masonry. Well, this is it. So then the top two are the signs and tokens of the Aaronic priesthood or the lesser priesthood, and then the tokens and whatever of the Melchizedek priesthood or the higher priesthood are the two on the bottom. And the first one is somebody puts their hand like this, and somebody else puts their thumb on the inside of the hand and their forefinger on the back, representing the sign of the nail, which where Jesus was crucified and hung on the cross. And that one's name is the Son, meaning the Son of God, or sure sign of the nail. No, or sign of the nail, right, Mason?
Sign of the nail. Yep.
Or sign of the nail. So there's your second one. Has it a name? All that mumbo jumbo. You repeat all of the mumbo jumbo every single time, Will you give me the second token of the Aaronic priesthood? I will through the veil. Has it a name? Has it a sign? Blah, blah, blah. Or has it a whatever. Anyway, what Mason said. I'm royally fucking this up because I don't care about it anymore. And then the second one is, now I remember there was a movie that came out that did this lower right-hand corner handshake, and everybody was mad. I want to say it was A Beautiful Mind, but I don't think that's right. But there was a movie that came out back in the 90s, and people were uproariously angry because of this being revealed. But it is, you interlock your middle finger or your pinky fingers like this. Well, I can't even do it to myself. It's impossible. With somebody else, you interlock your pinky fingers here, and then you do the handshake with your forefinger out, touching the inside of your wrist, which represents the sure sign of the nail, or the second nail that was pounded into Jesus Christ's wrist in order to make sure that the first nail, that he didn't rip through and fall off the cross. So, or the sure sign of the nail.
It's called Conspiracy Theory, the movie with Mel Gibson from 1997. Pretty good.
Conspiracy Theory. Yep, you're right. They gave this token in that, and Mormons were pissed. And the name of this one is a big long sentence, and I'm going to F it up. Okay, so we have the new name. So for Mason, that was Jethro. For me, that was Phoebe. The next one is your given name. So for Mason, that would be Douglas. For me, it would be Sarah. Your one bottom left corner is the sign of the nail, is the Son, meaning the Son of God, or sign of the nail. And the next one, this last one, so bottom right corner for you is going to be the patriarchal grip, or sure sign of the nail. Has it a name? It has. Okay, Mason, I'm going to butcher this, so correct me as I go.
So hold on a second. Hold on a second. Just so you know, like, for those of you that this is still special to you, we don't want to take away from any of this specialness of the temple. So just understand that that's the case. This is all about education and recognizing that what the church wants is fear about talking about these things. It's not because it's special or sacred, it's because it controls you. You cannot talk about it because it is a control thing. And that's what it is. If it's still special to you, you don't want to talk about it, fine. That's no big deal whatsoever. But that I just want to make sure that that's out there, because we're not meaning to be disrespectful to anything that someone holds sacred. It's an education piece in recognizing that there are things that things in the temple aren't as they appear, I think, is really what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I love that, Mason. Thank you, because I was getting all excited and ahead of myself, and I absolutely love Alex. If you can put Virginia's quote back up here, is those hand grips are seen in political circles and Hollywood movies all the time. You're right, because it comes directly from masonry. These are
Yep.
not as secret or sacred. I mean, I know that they're sacred to people who place meaning there, but these are not as secret as you think. The other thing that's really weird is there's all this don't say it, don't say it, don't say it to individuals all the time. Because it's super sacred and secret, and if we give these things out to people, that's going to be really, really bad. And I would like to know, where is the danger in this? Like, what is so secretive about, my secret new name, which is really culty? My first given name is not a secret. This handshake is, the sun or sign of the nail. What's so secret about this? And then the next one, again, what's so secret about it? It's all in the scriptures. All of these, not your new name, and we're going to talk about the new name here in a minute. But what is so secret or sacred about this? These are literally the handshakes and passcodes in Mormonism that you have to say or recite at the veil to get into heaven. And that's the only thing that makes these sacred, is if you haven't earned your way into the temple, you shouldn't know these, because God is a dimwit in Mormonism. And if you say these and you haven't earned them, you might get into heaven and you haven't earned it. So we are also doing a public service to make sure that everybody in the world can get into the temple. Okay? Or I'm sorry, not into the temple, into heaven, because God is not going to be able to look at your soul and know whether or not you got these in the right place at the right time. Yes, I'm being a little sarcastic. I know that what I'm saying is going to be taken as disrespectful to something that people hold sacred, but this is that belief pattern, and I want to educate. Go ahead, Mason. What were you going to say?
So one thing that's kind of interesting to me is that near the beginning of the temple the endowment ceremony, it says that you're going to receive all the tokens, signs, and everything necessary for you to pass the sentinels to get into heaven. And I didn't get all the words right in there, but basically the idea is we're giving you what you need to pass the sentinels that are basically the guards to get you into heaven. But there's another part in the Book of Mormon that talks about that the gatekeeper for heaven basically is Jesus, and it specifically says, and he employs no servant there. And it's just this concept.
Well, wait,
again.
Pause. You're giving me things. So you're saying that in the temple we learn that the people representing God are going to be, this is going to be like the 12 apostles and past prophets, right, Mason? The judges and the people who are letting us in. Representing God, because God's not going to be able to do this for everybody. So it's going to be a representative for God, even in heaven, which are going to be the sentinels to make sure you can't get in, under false pretenses. But then the Book of Mormon says that it's going to be Jesus. Yes, passed by the angels who stand as sentinels. And then Mason, go ahead and read that from the Book of Mormon. This is new for me. I'm sorry. Sarah's light bulbs, mind blown. Go, Mace.
So 2 Nephi chapter 9, verse 41. Oh, and this is Jake. For those of you that care, this is Jacob, the brother of Nephi, that is speaking. This is a sermon that he gives. He says, "Oh, then, my beloved brethren, come unto the Lord, the Holy One. Remember that his paths are righteous. Behold, the way for man is narrow, but it lieth in a straight course before him. And the keeper of the gate is the Holy One of Israel, and he employeth no servant there. And there is none other way save it be by the gate, for he cannot be deceived, for the Lord God is his name." And it just speaks to this idea, like, if you can step back from the temple for a second and just look at the fact that you have this Book of Mormon, you have the scriptures that say Jesus Christ is the gatekeeper. There's no other way to get in, and Mormonism holds to this, but Jesus Christ. You have to get in through Jesus Christ. He employeth no servant there. Like, there's nobody else there. But then you get to the temple and it says, we're going to give you all this information so you can pass the sentinels that guard heaven, basically. And I'm not remembering exactly what they said. And that's on me. But
No, this is what they say. Keep
basically
going.
what they're saying is, you to pass the sentinels, pass by the angels who stand as sentinels, right? In other
Thank
words,
you, MJ, for that.
the idea being that if you don't have the right things, those angels will stop you. But the Book of Mormon says that when you get to the gate, Jesus Christ cannot be deceived, for he's the Lord God, and he will decide if you can enter or if you can't. So what the problem that I have here, and I think this is why this whole temple series has been important, is that it is one way for religion to make you feel even more special, but it doesn't coincide with what their scripture teaches. And that's the issue. And that's what, for me, I got all swept up in that. This is the temple. I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be doing these things. I'm now worthy of blah, 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 whatever. It makes you feel special. It separates you from the people around you. You don't give them the kind of effort that you are supposed to give according to Jesus, right? To treat everyone the way that you want to be treated. You don't put in the effort to actually treat them that way because they're lesser. And Mormonism might say that they don't do that, but they do. And that's really the concern. The whole concern for the temple for me is that it doesn't coincide. Like, it's this
Right.
special thing that is secret. You don't want anybody to know, but the sequencing of the creation story isn't correct. The idea of how you tell a good angel from a bad angel isn't correct.
Isn't correct.
The story of Adam and Eve is not the same as what you get in your other scripture. The idea that there's sentinels.
Mace, really quickly. The story of the creation in the temple doesn't match the Bible or the Joseph Smith translation piece of the
Correct.
Pearl of Great Price. So
Correct.
this isn't the temple fixed what we didn't have before. No, 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 no. The temple fixed Joseph Smith.
Right.
And
Right.
the other thing, Mason, that you're saying that Alex is reminding us of is that, you're saying people don't want to know and blah, 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 blah. And yet our temple series has been the most listened to of all of our episodes ever. People want to know. And not because they're like, ooh, I'm curious and I want to use it against Mormons. But no, they want to know because they want to understand what's going on for Mormons that makes them so, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka Mormons. What is it that's so important? We want to understand these things because you're a curious people, which guess what? Mormons as a curious people is also a badge of honor. Keep going, Mason.
Well, I think that was the end of my list there. That just, there's so much inconsistency. And Virginia put up there, heaven, the ultimate exclusive club, right? And you know what? Fine. If in the New Testament it says, wide is the gate that leads to hell and narrow is the road that leads to heaven. So the idea there that is either it's supposedly said by Jesus or it's not, I don't know. The way it's written, it is said by Jesus. He's saying that there are things that are expected of you in order to get to heaven. And so, the idea that it is exclusive isn't unique to Mormonism. But it's just all this extra stuff. You have to know all this stuff. It's almost like they just keep adding things in order to keep you occupied so that you don't have to think about everything that you've just done.
Right.
We want you thinking, but we want you only thinking about the things that we've told you can think about. Because if you really start to think about all this stuff, you're going to recognize that there are issues. And
Right.
that's kind of the problem there, is that I don't want, like, if you choose to go to the temple, if you choose to be an active Mormon, I don't have any issues with that. I really don't. Because Mormonism has a lot of great things. But the way I described my story with the temple, why did I go to the temple? It was the next step. I had to go to the temple. It wasn't because I wanted to make covenants. It wasn't because I knew what I was getting into. It was simply, this was the next thing. If I want to get married in the temple, got to go to the temple. If I want to go on a mission, got to go to the temple. This was just
Right.
another check mark. Like, think about that. The only thing I was thinking about was going on a mission. I had to go to the temple to do that. Like, I want to get married forever. I have to go to the temple to get that. My focus wasn't on the temple. My focus wasn't on all the covenants that needed to be made or understanding all the things I needed to know to get back to heaven. My focus was about whatever had to happen, whatever I wanted that the temple was in the way of.
Right. Absolutely. I love that. Real quick shout out. If you are loving what you're seeing, here's our Venmo account. You can scan that and shoot us some money. Those funds are used 100% right now to help make sure that our production team is making a livable industry standard wage. So if you would like to see more of this content, we would absolutely love to give Alex another raise. He does amazing stuff. And one of my favorite things that Alex said in the private chat is, one of the reasons that he's standing here, well, he didn't say this, I'm putting words in his mouth right now. He's standing behind us. One of the things that he says that our purpose today is to improve informed consent.
Yes.
I hear a lot of podcasters say, we're not going to share these special details. Our entire reason for doing this temple series is to really break down what is going on inside the Mormon temple. Because if you're a member of the church and you want to know before you go in there and make these promises, now you know. That is called supporting and honoring true free will, or as Mormons like to call it, your agency or your free agency. We want you to be able to go in and understand what you are doing and why you are doing it before you get there. Because remember from our temple prep, not prep episode, all Mormons are going to teach you before you go to the temple is the same damn story of, this is our plan of salvation. You're going to go there. You need to keep all this shit secret. And Mason, before I have you comment on this, I want to give you the last secret passcode to the temple. So if you want to make it to heaven, you now know all the handshakes. Okay, you're going to pass these angels that are standing as sentinels that aren't supposed to be there because it's supposed to be Jesus Christ, but it's God's hand coming through the veil in the temple, not Jesus's hand, unless I guess you call Jesus God, which maybe the Church of Jesus Christ doesn't, they're not super clear on that. And I think the reason is because if you look at the first account of the first vision of Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon, Mormonism was a Trinity religion, and it wasn't until the second, third, or sixth, I don't remember which one, whatever the account is of the first vision, that's now the official account. Now we have a threesome going on in the Godhead, meaning God and Jesus are separate and distinct beings. And then the Holy Ghost is the only spiritual being without a body. And nobody really knows why he doesn't have a body except that he can come and live inside you. So we've got some, godly possession with the Holy Ghost going on here. Again, Mormonism grew from a Trinitarian religion into a dual theistic. Is it a dual theistic, Mason? Dual theology, dual theistic, whatever, religion. Basically, they went from 3 in 1, the egg theory, to 3 separate and distinct. Sometime around the time that Joseph Smith wrote the official first vision account. So anyway, our password, and then I'll turn the time over to Mason and we'll go ahead and close out, is, and Mason's going to correct me when I get this wrong. It took Mason like 2 or 3 times to memorize this. It took me like a year to memorize this. That's the difference in our brains. And that is, also just a reminder, if you like what you're seeing or hearing, subscribe, like, and share. That is how you can help us out the most. Even more so than donations, is to subscribe, like, and share, because that bumps us up in the algorithms so that these episodes are more visible to others. And the password is the final password to get into the temple, or into the kingdom of God, and to the highest degree of the celestial kingdom, if you also get judged and are found worthy by somebody to go in, is health in the navel, marrow in the bones, strength in the loins and in the sinews. Power in the priesthood be upon me and upon my posterity through all generations of time and throughout all eternity. Did I get it, Mace?
Holy crap, not a single mistake.
I'm still Mormon enough to make it into the heaven that I don't want to go into, because I don't like the Mormon God and don't really want to worship him. So since I have now revealed these things to you, and especially because I gave you my very specific new name, Phoebe Buffet. Actually, it's just Phoebe. And Mason, since I've done it for you, here you go. Give me a Gib slap, Mace. Give me the Jethro. Woo! Okay, so now that we have shared the mostest secretest part of the temple ceremony, we are now doomed from ever going to the Mormon heaven. And so we would like to let you know that our hell time party is going to be bring your own beer, because I ain't paying for that much alcohol for all y'all that are going to join me in Mormon hell / outer darkness. And since Satan is the one in Mormonism, the one to tell us the truth, because in Mormonism, God and Jesus do not tell us the truth, I would much rather be with the devil, who has at least some semblance of integrity. And I definitely would prefer to follow the Mormon Satan, because the Mormon God does this. Which is, if your church tells you not to date until you are 16 years old, but it's Prophet Joseph Smith married a 14-year-old, had sex with her, had a marital affair with a 16-year-old. You might be in a cult, y'all. But I would much rather be in Mormon hell and outer darkness with the truth-telling Satan. Bring your own beer, because I will not have the hellish dollars to pay for it yourself. And if you really love me, you can bring me a blackberry martini or blackberry sangria from the horrible chain store Outback, because oh my god, y'all, their blackberry martinis and blackberry sangrias are my absolute favorite. You will be forever loved by those of us here, or just me, actually. Mason won't care. Mason thinks it's gross. Loser. Um, anyway, he's laughing. For those of you that are just listening to this as a podcast, thank you, MJ. Okay, MJ says that she is going to bring us a sangria, and for that, MJ, I am going to send you a Raising Crazy stemless wine glass, Merc store. So please private message me or direct message me your address, and I will absolutely send you let me find it. Here it is. A Raising Crazy Growing Up to Show Up. This is from our Daisy Girl stuff. A stemless wine glass for bringing me a blackberry sangria from the Outback into our hell time party. I absolutely love it. I would rather be with a truth-telling Satan than a lying, conniving God who really acts like two toxic parents in a divorce, utilizing my life as his personal pawn to get his way. I'm off my soapbox. Love and peace from Sarah. Mason, go ahead and close us out.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Oh,
Good?
yeah,
That
I'm
was
done.
kind of a good rant. But
Let's see if you can top that, Mason, with your nasty cough and cold and congestion. Go for it.
oh, I'm not going to rant. I do have
I
three things
did.
that I want to say.
Go for it.
First, let me remind you, from my perspective, I don't have any issues with what goes on in the temple, with the exception of the fact that they won't talk about what goes on in the temple. People don't know. People go into the temple thinking that they're going to get something and they don't have any idea what it is. Whether they have a good experience, bad experience, fine, they don't know. And as we've just demonstrated from this episode and the one before, there's absolutely nothing that goes on in the temple that you couldn't talk about without keeping it just as sacred as it is. Like, if you don't want anybody to know the tokens, the signs, whatever, fine. In the teaching beforehand, the temple prep class, like we talked about before, you say, look, you're going to make covenants. Some of them are, you're going to covenant to be obedient. You're going to covenant to live the gospel. You're going to blah, blah, blah. You're also going to receive some tokens and some signs that are kind of a little bit odd. They're part of the process. Just be prepared for them. Don't even worry about remembering them. There'll be people there to help you as you go through the process. We want this to be special for you, and we want you to be aware of what's coming. That's all you have to say. For most people, it would improve the whole experience. And you've gotten at least some idea of what informed consent really is. That's my first thing. The second thing is actually completely off of that idea, but I just wanted to read something to you that I found funny, going back to Genesis chapter 2, and want you to see the timeline of this. This is chapter 2, verse 16 through 18. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Verse 18, and the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him an helpmeet. I don't know if you've noticed that, but the commandment to not eat of the tree came before Eve even existed, according to Genesis. I just found that interesting. And then finally, if you look at the temple and the way that they administer it, for me, it feels very much about control, not about the people. From the very beginning, you're talking about the temple recommend interview. I'll go back to what Shannon said. Shannon didn't share all the details. She was assaulted, and I think that that's terrific. I don't think she needs to share the details of those. But essentially, someone stopped her.
It's not terrific that she got assaulted, Mason, the way you just said.
Yeah.
That was bad. Not terrific she got assaulted.
No. I meant
terrific right, go ahead.
She didn't share the details. And that's completely fine. Someone in the process stopped her from being able to get what we would consider essential ordinances, quote unquote, essential to get back to God. Someone stopped her in the process because she was assaulted by someone and wouldn't forgive them. That's about control. That's not about the person. That is about control. And there's so many examples of that people have talked about on things like Mormon Stories, Mormonism Live, on podcasts. People have talked about these kinds of things that are keeping people out. You think about church discipline, don't take the sacrament. I'm going to take away from you one of the most spiritual things that you have, at least that you believe in, because I want you to repent. And it doesn't make sense. I'm going to keep you out of the temple.
Repent of being victimized. You didn't forgive your perpetrator. Therefore, you aren't worthy to stand in God's presence. What the fuck, Mormon church? I don't like that God. I'm not going to worship that type of a God. And Shannon's story is not the outlier. It is the norm. My father sexually abused me. My father physically abused me. My father purposefully put me or held me captive in my own home. And Mormonism wants me to forgive him, even though he has never apologized and has said over and over again he would do it the exact same way. I don't want that God. I don't want a God or a church that covers up sexual abuse at all. Mace, do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah, that is about religious control. There's also, I've listened to a few podcasts on from Cults to Consciousness that talk about those kinds of stories. A woman that got drunk and got assaulted, and she went through a disciplinary court and got excommunicated. Why in the hell are you getting excommunicated for getting drunk? That's not why she got excommunicated. She got excommunicated for something else that they didn't want to talk about. And that's the issue, is that you are controlling it, not helping the people. And that's really the only issue that I have with the temple in general, is that it is a piece of control. It is a method of controlling the people, and that is not okay with me.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you, Mason. So in closing, I want to say you now have all of the passcodes and tokens you need to get into Mormon heaven if you would like. You now have, if you listen to our entire temple series, you now have all the information you need for that informed consent to make a choice of your own free will and choice to go and participate in the ceremony. There are, if you YouTube, what does a Mormon temple ceremony look like? There are people who have worn recorders. You can watch the whole damn thing. There have been changes, many changes over the course of the years, but you're going to get a much more informed decision as to whether or not it's something that you want to participate in. So absolutely look that up. Mason, let's try and see if we can find one, and we can post a link to that also in the show notes. Next time, our next live episode, hang on. Our next live episode, we're going to talk about the sealing portion of it. Go ahead, Mason.
In the interest of full disclosure, you haven't told them everything they need to know. You've told them the names and the tokens, but you haven't covered the signs, my friend.
Oh, shoot. All right. Go ahead, Mason.
So,
give us the signs really quick.
Oh, no, I'm not doing that. You'll have to watch the video, I guess.
You have to watch. Okay, so sign, raise your hand to the square for the first one.
Yes.
Raise your, and is your hand in cupping form, I think, for the first one?
No, just the hand to the square.
Okay, this is number one. So this is Phoebe sign. This is the Phoebe sign and the Jethro sign. Okay. The second sign is hand flat, hand cupping.
Yep.
This is so that way you can cut your throat and catch it. Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. The third one is, oh shit, I'm not going to make it into Mormon heaven. Mace, help me out. What's the third one?
You're just.
Just give it to me. Come on, brat.
I'm trying to remember.
I think the first one's this. The second one is cupping, and then this. All right, the third one, you can't know because we don't remember it. And then the fourth one is you raise your hands high above your head, and while lowering your hands 3 times, you say, oh, right square, left square cupping. Thank you, MJ. Right square. Number 1. Number 2 is because I slit my throat and then raised it up, and now my right hand catches the blood. Thank you, MJ. See? MJ's got my back. Mason doesn't. Ugh. Fourth one, that's the handshake with the nail, is this.
The third one is... The third one is that's the sign, yes.
Right, the sign is, so this handshakey thingy goes with the left hand in cupping, right? And the right hand, I make the sign of the square because this is my knife. I'm going to slice my bowels open and catch all my bowels. Okay, they took the slicing out, but the signs are still there.
Yep.
And then the fourth one is, here we go. Oh God, hear the words of my mouth. Oh God, hear the words of my mouth. Oh God, hear the words of my mouth. Repeated 3 times. This is what you have to do before you can offer sacrifice according to Adam. Sounds a little sexual when I do it that way. All right, bingo. Hey, MJ gave me the green light. I did it correctly, MJ. Sangrias in hell with you. Or if we want to do it, before hell, we need to get together. It's been a while. So those are our signs. So now you know everything. Now you have the full disclosure. You've got informed consent. And I'm going to do the same thing to our audience that I did right after I walked through the veil. I went into the celestial room. I was met with all of my family. And Virginia, you were there, actually. So Virginia, here we go, is one, she's my mama right now because my mama isn't showing up in the way that I need. So Virginia was there, and I don't know if you remember Virginia or not, but I came through the veil. I had all my family there, and we immediately started making plans to head to lunch. Right there in the celestial room, my first experience was, as I said, very task-oriented and based. It was, all right, let's go. Sarah does not get a chance to process what the fuck just happened to her, because we got to get out of here and we got to go get lunch. And Mason, you and I got to get out of here and go get lunch and ride horses. So we love all of you. We will be giving you our next show, which will be on the sealing experiences, and we can talk about Mason's and my wedding day. I will have lots of pictures from our wedding, but we're also going to talk very specifically about the sealing of a child who is adopted to the family, which matches the same thing. If you don't get married in the temple and you do it later, what that actually looks like and who's allowed to come and who's not allowed to come. And then I think that will, and then we'll do the processing afterwards, which will be playing a lot of games with our audience and handing out a lot of fun prizes. And so please join us for all of that, because Mason, I'm hungry and I need some lunch. Love y'all. Mace, you have anything else you want to say before we go?
Nope. Thanks for being here, guys. Love you.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye.